Good evening and welcome. I'm glad you're here because tonight's story is one of those moments where you stop, you reread the details, and you realize this is bigger than it first appeared. This is not noise. This is not social media outrage. This is something that actually matters. Now, before we get into it, let me be clear about what we do here. This is not a place for shouting matches or knee-jerk reactions. This is a place for facts, for context, and for following the thread all the way to where it leads, even when that makes powerful people uncomfortable. If you're watching right now, you're not here by accident. You're here because you want to understand how things happen, not just what happened. You want receipts, timelines, motives, consequences. And tonight, the paper trail is unusual. The courtroom behavior is unusual. The stakes are very real, so settle in. If you're new, consider subscribing, because this is the kind of story that doesn't end in one night, and we will stay with it. All right, let's talk about why a former president raised his voice at a judge, and why a war crimes trial is suddenly at the center of the conversation. Okay, so I've been covering politics for a long time now, and I thought I had seen everything. I thought after all the scandals and the lawsuits and the investigations and the impeachments, I thought nothing could shock me anymore. But what I'm about to tell you genuinely made my jaw drop when I first read about it, because we're not talking about financial fraud here. We're not talking about classified documents or hush money payments or any of the usual Trump controversies. We're talking about potential war crimes, actual war crimes, the kind of thing that gets people hauled before international tribunals, the kind of thing that has historically ended with powerful people spending the rest of their lives in prison. And the person at the center of all this is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News host that Trump appointed to run the entire United States military. And what Hegseth has apparently been doing in the Caribbean over the past few months is so disturbing, so fundamentally at odds with everything America is supposed to stand for, that even I'm having trouble processing it. We're talking about military strikes on boats in the Caribbean that have killed at least 87 people. We're talking about something called double tap attacks, where after the initial strike kills people on a boat, a second strike is ordered specifically to kill the survivors. We're talking about people being executed without any due process, without any trial, without any opportunity to surrender, just killed on the spot because someone in the Pentagon decided they looked like drug traffickers. And now a federal judge is investigating whether any of this was legal. And Trump, predictably, is absolutely losing his mind about it. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. We've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. We've had a bit of a pause because it's hard to find boats to strike right now, which is the entire point, right? Deterrence has to matter, not arrest and hand over, and then do it again. Hegseth tweeted last night his support for Admiral Frank Bradley, the Navy SEAL who was at the time the Joint Special Operations Commander overseeing the strike, following suggestions in the media that Hegseth was shifting responsibility for the strike to Admiral Bradley. The screaming started on Truth Social, because of course it did, where Trump posted a rant on December 10th, calling the judge a fake judge and accusing the entire investigation of being a witch hunt designed to sabotage the war on drugs. He claimed that Hegseth is a hero who is doing what needs to be done to stop drug trafficking. He dismissed the entire concept of war crimes as something that doesn't apply to American military operations, and he attacked anyone who dares to question what has been happening in the Caribbean. But here's the thing, and this is what makes this story so important. It's not just some random critics who are raising concerns. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, a man named Volker Turk, has publicly called on the United States to halt these strikes. He has warned that what is happening constitutes extrajudicial killing, which is a polite way of saying murder without trial. The International Criminal Court is reportedly looking into whether formal war crimes charges should be filed, and members of Congress from both parties have been demanding that the administration release video footage of these strikes so the American people can see what is actually being done in their name. This is not a partisan witch hunt. This is the international community and members of our own government looking at what Hegseth has been doing and saying, this looks like war crimes. And Trump's response to all of that scrutiny has been to scream louder and demand immunity from prosecution. Let me give you a sense of the scale of what we're talking about here, because I think a lot of people have not been following this story closely and don't realize how many people have been killed. According to documentation that has been compiled, there have been 22 separate military strikes on 23 vessels in the Caribbean since this program began. 87 people have been killed, 87 human beings who were on boats in the Caribbean, killed by American military forces without any trial, without any due process, without any opportunity to prove their innocence. And some of those people, according to leaked information about the strikes, were killed in second attacks that specifically targeted survivors of the initial strikes. Think about what that means for a second. A boat gets hit, people are injured, people are in the water trying to survive, and then a second strike is ordered to finish them off. That's not combat. That's not self-defense. That's execution. That's murder. And it's being carried out by the United States military on the orders of Pete Hegseth with the full backing of Donald Trump. And when anyone dares to point out that this might be, illegal under international law, Trump screams about witch hunts and fake judges and demands immunity from the International Criminal Court. This is genuinely one of the most disturbing stories I have ever covered, and I think every American needs to understand what is being done in our name. All right, so let us really get into the details here, because this story is complicated, and there's a lot of context that I think is important for understanding just how serious these allegations are. So the military strikes we're talking about began in September of 2025, so about 3 months ago. The stated justification was that these boats in the Caribbean were being used by drug traffickers to smuggle narcotics into the United States. And look, I want to be clear about something up front. Drug trafficking is a real problem. Fentanyl and other drugs are killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. Nobody is saying that we shouldn't be doing anything about drug trafficking. The question is whether what Hegseth has been doing is legal, whether it's proportionate, whether it's consistent with American values and international law. And the answer to all of those questions, according to a growing number of legal experts and human rights organizations, is no. What has been happening in the Caribbean is not law enforcement. It's not interdiction. It's extrajudicial execution, and that's a very different thing. The incident that really brought all of this to public attention happened on September 2nd of this year. According to leaked information about the strike, American military forces attacked a boat in the Caribbean that was suspected of carrying drugs. The initial strike disabled the vessel and killed or wounded the people on board, and then, according to the leaks, a second strike was ordered. This second strike, sometimes called a double tap, was specifically intended to hit survivors, people who were in the water, people who were wounded and unable to fight back, people who posed no threat to anyone at that moment. They were killed anyway. And when this information started to come out, when reporters and human rights organizations started asking questions, the response from the Trump administration was not to deny it. The response was not to express regret or promise an investigation. The response was to defend it, to say that these were drug traffickers who deserved what they got, to argue that the normal rules of engagement, the normal protections of international humanitarian law don't apply in the war on drugs. That's an extraordinary position. That's the United States government essentially saying that it can kill anyone it wants anywhere in the world as long as it labels them a drug trafficker first. No trial, no evidence presented, no opportunity to surrender or prove innocence, just death. The legal concerns here are enormous, and I want to walk through them carefully because I think it's important for people to understand why this is such a big deal. Under international humanitarian law, which the United States has historically supported and helped to create, there are rules about when and how military force can be used. Combatants who are wounded or who have surrendered are protected. You cannot target people who are hors de combat, a French term that means out of the fight. If someone is floating in the water after their boat was destroyed, they are hors de combat. They're not a threat. They can't fight back. And attacking them is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. It doesn't matter what they were allegedly doing before. It doesn't matter if they were drug traffickers or terrorists or anything else. Once they're no longer a threat, once they're wounded or surrendering, they have legal protections. And deliberately attacking them is murder. That's not my opinion. That's the law. That's what the United States itself has argued in international forums for decades. And what Hegseth has apparently been doing, ordering second strikes specifically to kill survivors, is a textbook violation of those principles. The United Nations response to these strikes has been unambiguous. On October 31st, about 6 weeks ago, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk issued a public statement calling on the United States to halt the strikes. He used the term extrajudicial killing, which is the most serious accusation you can make under international human rights law. Extrajudicial killing means killing people without any legal process, without any trial, and without any opportunity for them to defend themselves. It's what dictatorships do. It's what authoritarian regimes do. It's not supposed to be what the United States does. And yet here we are, with the top human rights official at the United Nations publicly accusing America of committing extrajudicial killings. Think about how extraordinary that is. Think about the damage this is doing to our reputation around the world. Think about what it means for our ability to criticize other countries for their human rights violations when we're doing things like this ourselves. The moral authority of the United States, which has always been one of our greatest assets on the world stage, is being destroyed by these policies. And Trump's response is to scream at the judge who's investigating it. Now, let me talk about the International Criminal Court angle, because this is where things get really interesting and really concerning for Trump and Hegseth. The ICC is an international tribunal that has jurisdiction over war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and the crime of aggression. The United States has historically had a complicated relationship with the ICC. We helped create it, but never joined it, and previous administrations have taken various positions on whether Americans can be prosecuted there. But here's the thing. The ICC can exercise jurisdiction over crimes committed on the territory of member states, even if the perpetrators come from non-member states, and many Caribbean nations are members of the ICC. So if American forces committed war crimes in their territorial waters, the ICC could potentially have jurisdiction, and that's exactly what the court appears to be considering. There are reports that the International Criminal Court Prosecutor's Office is examining the Caribbean strikes to determine whether a formal investigation is warranted. And if they open an investigation, and if they find evidence of war crimes, they could issue arrest warrants for the people responsible, including Hegseth, and potentially including Trump himself. The Trump administration's response to the ICC threat has been, to put it mildly, aggressive. According to reports from early December, the administration has been pressuring the ICC to essentially amend its founding document, the Rome Statute,